There we go. Track me. Thank you very much. Oh, that's perfect. Great. My apologies to everyone. I sincerely am an hour late, but my God, a lot of problems to deal with, and I will do my best to show up on time. And as always, last evening we had a lot of people show up, and thank you as always for that. And this is why I can't see my comments, so hang on, because some of you sent some comments, and for some stupid reason you had to log in for like the 2000th time to be able to see your comments. So let me see if I can do that. And I understand if no one watches us tonight because I am understandably very, very late. And I hope to go very, very quickly because let's just see, is he gonna accept my password? Who knows? What a pain in the ass modern technology has become. Well, what is he saying? So, okay, so I can, theoretically, I have the capability to chat online during this podcast. So, I'm just going to write hello. Apparently, it seems to be working. So, if anyone wants to contact me, I am here. I want to go as quickly as possible this evening. We all know last evening we were confronting that issue of Gilles Deleuze and the Grandeur of Marx. But if you look at the icon for tonight's podcast, you will notice that we have given Karl Marx some R&R from the jungles of Vietnam, where he seems to be having a really fun time on the beach and getting some rest from these kind of boring, let's say, arguments. So Charlie don't surf, but Karl Marx surfs, huh? And he's having a good time. So just a few quick points where we jump into what I would call a cleanup on this whole issue and on Deleuze, guattari, and Marx, which obviously we looked at it in a very superficial way, but we can go into that on depth sooner or later or whenever. Now, regarding the issues of Marx, if you go to our website, which is deleusemodeste.com, I'm going to be posting, I think, tomorrow, all of these gallery of images we have created with a bunch of people in Vietnam, including Antonin Artaud, Karl Marx, amongst others. And if you go to our website, we just put up like kind of these very brief web galleries of the AI images that we've done. There's no monetization, there's no NFTs. That would be completely absurd. Like I've said before, I'm very interested in image generation in AE, but however, I really don't believe, except for certain extreme cases, that it's an art form. So it's just kind of we post our pictures, which are a little bit ironic, and kind of follow the line of the Deleuze-Guattarian concept of the capitalism being the end of history, So it's like not the end of existence, just the end of history as we know it, as a linear process, So you might find in our website Nietzsche on Mars, for example. You might find a Minotaur drinking a beer On the beach, you might find a small gallery of Henri Bergson in the plateaus of Afghanistan. And we're going to upload a full series of just these very simple images. We hope you will appreciate them. I repeat again, we do not really consider that art. And there's nothing monetized, no NFTs. I personally think that anyone that would purchase an NFT has to be completely crazy, but if you have the money, you can do what you want, apparently. Second thing, really quick, because I want to get on to and I put the link in this time to Anne Sauvagnargues regarding we saw yesterday essentially, and I do believe this, that the relationship until 1970 between Deleuze and Marx was very, very peripheral. No? If anything, Marx was kind of a contra figure of Hegel, and therefore, part of Deleuze's attack on Hegel. But as we saw yesterday, we always have to look into the wider context. So up until 1970, very little was actually published and known about Karl Marx in France. So in intellectual, post-war intellectual circles, like we saw yesterday, Karl Marx was kind of just like an icon of communism, kind of like Che Guevara or Fidel Castro today, not knowing too much about him or his philosophy. However, the image of Karl Marx kind of inducted this kind of fetish of equality and communism, and understandably so. Quite obviously. The last thing I wanted to say very quickly before we delve into this, and I'm going to have to skip a lot of text, so I repeat, please go to the link which I put here, and this is, just to be clear, this is on cairn.info, and it's an interview between Isabelle Garot, Marxist philosopher, and Anne Sauvagnargues, asking their opinions about the relationship between Gilles Deleuze and Karl Marx. So tonight we've already looked at Isabelle Garot, we're going to look very quickly at Anne Sauvagnargues. And I just wanted to say very quickly before we get into this, just because of the few criticisms we had, et cetera, that maybe this podcast, the website is called Gilles Deleuze, but maybe there's some misconceptions there, and let me explain it to you very quickly and very briefly. Deleuze modest. Deleuze does not mean that anything goes, that we're modest and therefore anyone can say anything and we'll try and no. The whole point of this website is to shuck off or peel off all of the garbage having surrounded Gilles Deleuze, especially since his death, and all of the books written and all the misinterpretations and quite frankly capitalist exploitation using Deleuze to get places in universities, to become teachers, to sell books, and obviously there are some very, very talented and qualified people to do that, but at the same time there's been like a serious abuse by a lot of people that have used the name of Deleuze and Deleuze and guattari to make money and try and sell things which absolutely they do not know what they're speaking about. And then obviously you can say, well, who are you to say that? But once again, I will give you an example very quickly what is very dear to me. So when I graduated way back in the early 1990s, towards the death of Deleuze, I was studying architecture, and Deleuze became very, very much into fashion in architecture because obviously there was this whole very seductive vocabulary, the war machine, smooth space. So Obviously, architects, were sucked into this trap, and I'm not going to name names. And then a lot of people got into universities, kind of, saying they were Deleuzian and their works were Deleuzian. And the case of architecture for me, what was happening was pretty clear and not so easy to figure out. Meaning, architects, and I've said this a million times, I'll be very quick. They were like that in that area. It was the explosion of digital design, no. So we had AutoCAD, but AutoCAD was for losers. So Maya, that's a cool name. So, some people, I'm not naming names, you should know the name already. You left their jobs and they became programmers. In Maya, programmers meaning that they could string together 3 lines of code and then take a spline, do a revolution, and then get this kind of squashed donut. And this was presented as Deleuzian smooth space. Why? Because the spline has singularity points, blah blah blah, blah 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 blah. In my opinion, having spent a lot of time reading the text, there's a massive error which happened there, and I repeat, I think so many people did it. I can name a long list of people, who are building, like, I've said it before, donuts and bubbles full of neon LED lights that would change colors. But let me see if I even have the brain cells left to write it out. There is in the analysis of architecture by Deleuze and Guattari, which is very, very fleeting. You could have what we call ideal space, which we will call form. So form is the actual final object of building, no? Then you have the perception of a space by a living subject. Not easy to, not difficult to explain. No, I walk in here, can I orientate myself? Where is west? Where's the sunlight? Where's my bedroom? Where's my bathroom? Blah, blah, blah. And then something that everyone missed in this whole issue of the nomad of smooth space by Deleuze and Guattari would be called the method of construction. And this you could very easily, in a lazy manner, because I am also a lazy intellectual, you could define this as spatialization. Spatialization. This is where space is determined. Spatialization, probably wrong, but this is where space can be determined by a concept. So if you're interested in these things, for example, the book by Gilles Deleuze on Francis Bacon obviously is very important, but however, I would all recommend that you go to the archives in the lectures by Deleuze on painting in space. And this has obviously a very strong relationship to architecture, and then there you can begin to understand why Deleuze is saying that space is not ideal. That's the first one. Why don't I see these things on the screen? Hang on. That ain't cool. Sorry about that. Let's see. Oh, turn that off. What is this guy doing? Turn that on? No. Well, that sucks. Hang on, let me try and fix this. I'm like sharing my tax applications or, yeah, pages, buddy. Mac, I hate you. Why is this page? Let's try and copy everything. Copy it. We're going to close that. Supprimer. What am I looking at here? No clue whatsoever. Hang on, I'm going to start shutting things down in OBS. Media source. Nothing here. Nothing here. Video, audio. There's only one. There we go. So, logically, what is this bro sharing? Let's reopen pages. Not numbers, for God's sake. Je te déteste. Welcome to numbers. Yeah, no, this is numbers, pages, s'il vous plaît. Putain, vierge. Ouais, c'est vierge. Et paste, coller. And let's open this window again. No, he's showing my capture d'écran. No, he wants another one. Capture d'écran max success. Ajouter une source. No, no, no. Et c'est qui? C'est capture de fenêtre. Pages, son titre. Allez! Every once in a while, a small miracle will help us. So, and we can, this is not even important, but, you know, ideal space, ideal form, perception of space by living subject, method of construction. So, and then you could even add to this, you can go into state architecture, and then you can go into nomad architecture. Nomad architecture. This stuff is architecture. And then the state architecture, obviously, according to Deleuze and Guattari, you will have smooth space. But, sorry, that's obviously wrong. Striated space. Space, 2 times, great. And then in nomad architecture, we will have smooth space. So, smooth space. I can show you very clearly, in my opinion, and once again, you people will decide, but the big, and hang on, method of construction, spatialization concept, I will write here, virtual forces. So, all of these architects that wrote all of their books and built all this bizarre shit, sustaining that there was smooth space, were, in my opinion, simply dealing with 2 things. Ideal space form, that means the final object. So if I make a weird bubble-shaped object like donuts intersecting, and I do it obviously digitally, that has to be smooth space. Now, why does it have to be smooth space? Because in their opinion, the perception of space by a living subject is what they believe, Deleuze and Guattari think is smooth space, meaning that I walk into this structure, I'm completely disoriented. I don't know north from south, left from right. Everything is, you know, then we have lights everywhere. I'm completely disoriented, and therefore I am in smooth space. And why not? Because Deleuze and Guattari said that, you know, being in the middle of the ocean or being in the middle of the desert is smooth space, and therefore I am in my construction I made, saying this is Deleuze-Guattarian smooth space. It's like I'm in the middle of the ocean, I'm in the middle of the desert, I have no means of cognitively or spatially, perceptually mapping my directions. Everything is just, you know, I'm not sure if I would want a house like that, but you know, whatever. But what they're all missing is the method of construction, and I'm absolutely convinced of this. And the method of construction what's going to happen here is you are going to have to do this. We're going to have to do state architecture. Necessarily has the role of an architect, okay? So state architecture, what does it do? And right now, we're going to put aside everything, forget about the final object, what it looks like, because that's not important. It means nothing. Forget about the perception of the viewer inside of that space, living inside. It means nothing, according to Deleuze and Guattari. What matters is spatialization according to their concept of smooth space, which implies the virtual forces in the construction, in the actual physical building process of that space. Let's explain it a little bit better. Historically, what is the role of the architect? The architect is ipso facto, by nature, someone who operates for the state. The architect builds a drawing according to the necessities of the state. Today it could be the client, whatever you want. And then that is drawn, and then a blueprint is made, and then the construction workers take that blueprint and replicate it. It doesn't matter by what technology. It could be 5,000 years ago with bricks dried in mud. It could be stone carved by the Egyptians. It could be a 3D printer. There's no difference for Deleuze and Guattari. That is just a mold. The blueprint is a mold which will be executed according to the drawing, which is the blueprint and the mold. And that is the role of the architect. So why? That is striated space, and it could never be anything, according to them, except striated space. So what happens in nomadic architecture? Well, in nomadic architecture, let's see if this thing is working, we have no architect. There is no architect. All of the cathedrals built in France and in the southeastern Spain and northern Italy were built by guilds. So already you have a multiplicity of people. I can't even write, but that's because I am ignorant. We have a I hate keyboards. Multiplicity, can I do it? Yes, of workers essentially involved in this. Why is a Gothic cathedral an example of smooth space? There's no blueprint. There is no blueprint. Let's see if I'm capable. Blueprint. Well, whatever, we'll be satisfied with that. There is no theological, or let's just say no predestined result. There is either no drawing, or there is, or drawings become extremely localized, and the relation to the whole becomes problematic. Very easy to understand. State architecture, there's a blueprint, and at this point we can get back to the real point, is that like in those years, in the late 90s, when all these architects were, what they would do, and I've seen so many of it, you would make all these weird, bizarre shapes and extrude them, and they were doing it in Maya because Maya was cool, Maya was sellable. Nowadays, Grasshopper, I'm really interested in Grasshopper. That's very, very interesting software. But you can revolve your weird shapes or whatever. In the end, when you go to construction, you're going to print that, and that is already an object which exists in ideal space, and the builders will follow the technology of today, and they will build that in the steel factories and bend the steel and curve the glass and 3D print what they have to, and they will assemble with the latest technology all these fabulous, bizarre structures. But for Deleuze and Guattari, that is simply state space, because you're just replicating what the architect has done as a drawing. And therefore, the virtual forces, the means of construction, necessarily exclude, let's say, the role of the nomad, meaning it's irrelevant if you have to do it in stone or in wood or in super advanced titanium with bent plexiglass molds. It's the technology that takes care of that. But in the case of the cathedrals, it was the guilds and the workers' guilds that went to each site, and they were itinerant, they were mobile. So they would say in Amiens, north of France, bros, we need a cathedral for the local prince, and it has to be, the highest cathedral. So they would go there, and they would employ what Deleuze correctly calls, because you can look in all of the books on techniques of Gothic construction, the numbering number, meaning that everything would depend on what came in the local quarries, how big were that. So here we would have a 4x2, here we'd stick a 2x2, and then we'll go up, and everything is contingent. There's no theological, there's no predestined result. In fact, no two cathedrals are equal. In fact, a lot of them actually fell down. So it's this numbering number, but this we have to leave for, another podcast where, you are spatializing. You're creating space as you go. You're not using a blueprint, and it doesn't matter if you did it by hand or you did it with the most advanced software. If you've drawn it and then you just go and build it according to the drawing, that cannot be spatialization. And then you could go and look in, like, for example, what is the concept of Gothic spatialization, no? And Deleuze, you can find this very easily if you go into Bacon, but also much more deeply into his lectures at the Vincent on space and painting. And then you'll get into Egyptians who were terrified of depth, and then we go to Greece, where we completely have this multifrontal kind of depth, and then we go to the Renaissance, and then we move on. And so space is something, according to Deleuze, which has a very strong relation to a concept. It's not a form. There's no idealist X, Y, zeta axis in which everything. Space is a product of the virtual forces which forged that space, and then you get into Gothic art. Take a Romanesque church, which is obviously the period before Gothic churches. You would have the church built according to a plan with all the arcs that kept everything up, and then art, sculpture, painting was just an issue of filling up the space. We'll put a painting here, let's paint the altar, let's place a sculpture there. But in Gothic art, in a cathedral, the sculptures have a completely different relationship to space, and they have a completely different relationship to the structural and constructive forces of how that cathedral was made. So you will find sculptures that are in kind of like key structural points, that maybe reinforce even a little bit the buttress, which will then allow you to go up another 10 meters, and then those guilds will go up those 10 meters, and then what can we do here? Can we go up further? Can I, put other structural reinforcements? Do I put another statue? Do I put a gargoyle here, for example, et cetera, et cetera? So that is, once again, it's my pet peeve that everyone, believed that Finn wrote books and made all kinds of money and got, positions teaching, making us believe that, if I just do, weird circular shit in using software that has to be smooth space, and it's so superficial, no? Because why is that smooth space then? Well, because it's all curved, it's all curvy, so it should be smooth. But the concept of Deleuze and guattari has nothing to do with like curviness or rigidness. Read Le Corbusier, Le Poème de l'angle droit, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to cut this whole thing off right now. I have to do something very quickly. And just to explain, our point here was this podcast, Deleuze Modeste, is not about saying, yeah, we're modest and yeah, thumbs up to everything. No, it's exactly the opposite. We're saying, up to us, up to me, we're denouncing things we believe, which you may or may not believe. You don't have to believe. You make your own decisions, as always. That were just kind of misappropriations for obvious reasons. I mean, Deleuze has denounced marketing, infiltrating literature and philosophy. He was doing that in the 1990s. Do you think in 2024 it's any better? I mean, we don't even realize when we are doing it, and that's just the extent to which money and marketing has absolutely saturated everything. So the point of this podcast, in a modest way, is to try and actually think and resist and say no, and to get back to the very simple things, and let's start again from zero, because Deleuze and guattari, they will not be fully appreciated for centuries. Architects from the 20th century will not be appreciated. That's the way history works. We don't know. That's the final phase of a philosopher, is post-mortem. Where is he going to fall into the canon of philosophy? And we still don't know. So there's and all the faithful students of famous philosophers in throughout history amount to absolutely nothing. So there's no use wasting your time and being a good and obedient follower, especially today. I also noticed that, oh my God, what's it called? I can't remember the name, but another social media platform was arrested in Paris, in France, aujourd'hui, today. And these are quite simply not happy times for free thinking or for free speech. So hang on, let me take a 30-second break and let's get to our real issue. apologies for that. And let's move ahead very quickly. So, right now I'm switching to article with our interview with Anne Sauvagnargues. And what she's going to be doing is talking about the relationship between Deleuze and Marx, but especially with the collaboration with Félix Guattari. So things definitely change with Guattari, and here I'm going to be a little bit in difficulty because I would love to sit here and read the whole thing, but you are just gonna justly switch off and watch something more interesting. So I'm just gonna try and pick up a few highlights here and put them on our text block. So where's the original article? What we have is okay, let's do this. I'm not even going to read the French because I'm sure that's going to be boring as hell for you too. I'm just going to translate it. There we go. This is Anne Sauvagnargues. Oh, but why do I have to... Hello. Terrible. I think we can do it. We got it done. Here is our translation. So super straightforward. Let's do this really quick. We're missing our A here from our dear Anne. I will insist on the fact that Deleuze's relationship to Marx is transformed by Félix Guattari. We of course find in Deleuze, before their meeting, the impact of Marx, though Sartre, in particular, of whom Deleuze writes, he was my master, which he does not often say, correct? I will go back to last night, but the Grandeur of Marx, I doubt Deleuze would attribute that to Karl Marx, but I'm not a hater of Karl Marx, absolutely. Marx is very, very important, but Sartre was my master, and Deleuze does not say that very often. He then intended to defend Sartre, attacked for his refusal of the Nobel Prize, but he often recalls how Sartre woke the young philosophers of his generation for their scholastic slumber, even if Sartre's humanism seems obsolete to him, as much as his phenomenological connection. In any case, Marx makes his vibrations felt throughout post-war French philosophy, from Sartre to Merleau-Ponty, Foucault, and obviously Guattari, who, unlike Deleuze, gets involved as an activist, first of all to the PC, that is the Parti Communiste, Communist Party, then in the communist way. Each in their own way experiences the attraction of a political more than historical materialism. And here, what I need to do, and I'm going to keep my chat open because I would hate to miss any comments. I'm going to shoot something out there. I'm going to say on the chat, what can I say? Oh my God, do you agree? Okay, that's out on my chat. Feel free to reply, and we're going back to oof, I still think this is useful, but in a little bit I'm going to have to start skipping stuff big time because this answer is indeed a very, very long one, but here we go. No. Oh my God, hang on. Wrong language. Loser. Goodness me. Hang on, let me retry that. Yeah. Here we go. Got it now. Here we are. Deleuze, too, most certainly. He may give the impression of being, as he says, a pure metaphysician, but his concepts are weighted in a very strong way. They relate to an experience that they configure, like a lamp that is lit. This incredible capacity characterizes his conceptual invention. Although a pure metaphysician, or the most innocent philosopher of his generation, one who does not believe that philosophy ends by commenting on its own history, but that it is always a question of creating a concept, Deleuze takes from Marx this concrete, active dimension of thought. But unlike Guattari, he does not assert it either in political action or in social demands. There is no dimension of militant activism for him. He sticks to the level of the concept. We do not find any social issues or demands for political transformation in Deleuze, unlike Guattari until his meeting with him. It is then that the problem of capitalism takes shape as a decisive problem for philosophy. Very interesting here. From my point of view, it is impossible to question the relationship between Deleuze and Marx without highlighting the meeting with Pierre Félix Guattari. Okay, so that should be clear to us right now, and I'm always afraid I don't want to skip too much. I'm going to do one more paragraph and then start skipping, because I repeat, you guys cannot read this, and you do not need me to do this translation, which ChatGPT or even Google can do much better than I. Let's put up the next part, and then I will skip a little bit. Let me see if we can see that. Yes, we can. So, however, Deleuze defends a materialist thought, which is reflected in his philosophical practice. In the lineage of philosophers he chooses, an empiricist lineage which pushes him to choose Hume rather than Hegel for his higher education diploma. Think about how important it is in these times, in those times, to choose Hume over Hegel, and we will read about how you really needed balls to do that in those times. No, it's not like today when you can do anything, no one gives a fuck. In those times for your career, that's risky stuff, huh? So unlike Foucault, who chose Hegel, or Althusser, who chose Hegel, joining Hume with Lucretia and Nietzsche, or even Bergson, means choosing figures deemed minor or devalued by choosing non-classical, bold, provocative markers, but which still remain in the philosophical field, as Isabelle says Garot. It's got to be a bad translation. As says Isabelle Garot. It took courage. It took courage. Repeat, this is what I've been saying the last few nights. These people, Nietzsche, Bergson, but can you imagine, Hume, Lucretia, these were all like, yes, like she says, peripherically they do exist in philosophy, but they were people that were completely cancelled by the philosophical culture of that time, just like today, cancel culture. These guys, it was unthinkable to talk about these people, but it took courage to be interested in Nietzsche or to study Bergson, known to be a fool and a mystic. So I've said that before. Bergson at one point was extremely popular. He had the famous debate with Einstein, and I'm not sure, he founded the United Nations. And it's not small stuff, but he ended up in complete ridicule. And before or after, shamans people like smoking opium, would go there and like mind energy, all this kind of mystical stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So think about how much courage it took by Deleuze to go there and say, no, look, for me, intuition is a rigorous philosophical method that takes intelligence and it takes balls at the same time. Excuse my French. Spinoza plays an intermediate role. Okay, since once again we come to Martial Guerrou, we'll soon devote two masterly works to him in 1968 and 1974. But he is valid for this period as a defender of materialism and a reference against Hegel, because he grants to matter the same perfection as to nature. Thought and thinks God as immanent substance. The presence of Marx comes through this reference to Spinoza. So here we get a little bit more complicated and a whole other issue, which would be really interesting. And I do have, not here, but back in Italy, a bunch of all the works of Martial Guerrou, who was a marshal in the First World War, who, after all the horrors he witnessed, dedicated himself to, let's say, translating and writing, I think there were 3, not 2, tomes on Spinoza, and kind of he was the responsible for bringing Spinoza into French culture at that time. And as I said yesterday, we always have to remember that nowadays we live in a hyper-connected internet world, and if I want to study phenomenology, Merleau-Ponty, boom, Amazon Kindle, Amazon or whatever, but in those times it took decades and decades and decades for certain authors to seep in to intellectual culture, and almost because of people like Martial Guerrou, who did the hard work, let's say. This presence of Marx comes through this reference to Spinoza. Deleuze chooses Spinoza in his complementary thesis of 1967. The modal theory of the individual, the emphasis on the expression as physics of the laws of nature, as opposed to the metaphysics of moral eminence, practicing the analogy, using meanings with a view to submission. We find in this book all the criticism of the substantial subject and the definition of an ethics, both theoretical and practical, which plays such a big role in the latest version of his second book on Spinoza in 1981. Evil is a matter of bad encounters. In French, it's not evil, but more or less that works in a translation. So here, essentially, without getting into the kind of richness of this statement, we can just say is that according to Anne, it's through Spinoza that Marx gains or regains a kind of relevance in the thought of Deleuze. And once again, let's see what's going on. Now here I want to skip a little bit, just because I don't want to waste time. Let's do this very quickly. This concludes her first answer, and I repeat the question. Let's not forget the question was Anne Sauvagnargues. Comment percevez-vous, how do you perceive, pour votre part, by your part, the relations between Deleuze and Marx before the collaboration with Guattari? So we're still talking about the before, according to Anne Sauvagnargues. And I'm just going to do, no, I'm even going to skip that. No, I'm not going to skip that. Let's try and be, not skip too much, huh? I mean, you can always just justly shut this down and watch something more interesting, but I do not want to eliminate too many things where they could could be something important. So this is her answer to this last question, which is her opinion on only Gilles Deleuze's relation to Marx. We have to conclude the key problem. Hang on, let me write a big shout out on someone sent me a heart sign. Thank you. I'm gonna write a smiley. Oh my god, YouTube has horrific smileys. Is that SpongeBob? Okay, I'm chatting and I'm sending out SpongeBob to someone out there. SpongeBob, you rock. There we go. Okay, back to the substance here. To conclude, the key problem, it seems to me, in the relationship between Deleuze and Marx before 1968 concerns the status of difference. Marx appears in his book on Nietzsche under the mask of a Hegelian with whom Nietzsche allows him to break. This is what determines the second feature of his relationship with Marx, the difference asserted in a polemical manner against the opposition, the negative, and the refusal of any dialectical understanding of history. In Difference and Repetition, Deleuze relies on Marx, on a Marx revised by Althusser, to give difference first place, but in this complex operation, which consists of confronting difference with opposition, with negation, with contradiction, Deleuze uses Marx first of all as an auxiliary in the struggle he leads against Hegel. Even if this way of taking charge of the dialectic actually opposes him to Althusser, Deleuze relies on Althusser to assert this reading of Marx against Hegel. There is, however, a political issue in this affirmation of difference. With Deleuze, difference and its dispersive play become a more violent factor of political action than the factor of unitary attraction of an organization. However, it is this difference and this dispersion that student organizations, unions, or parties were unable to take into account because they were entirely caught up in a unanimous vision of organization. Deleuze, with his primacy of difference, thus allows us to find Marx outside the centered and sovereign orthodox vision of a party. It is on this ground that the break with Althusser also lies. This work on difference therefore shows the political difference which separates Deleuze from most of the Marxists of his times, but also accounts for the connection between Guattari and Deleuze precisely about Marx. Someone sent me another heart. I'm sending you a 100 sign. What in God's name? So once again, very, very complicated. You will read the article, but essentially this insistence on the concept of difference will, and here it's written very eloquently, Deleuze's insistence on difference and therefore on difference as non-negation. And I repeat, for all people that have problems with this concept, it's so easy. Deleuze spent his youth reading obsessively Bergson, and Bergson, in the book on Bergsonism, will explain to you precisely why difference through the history of Western thinking and philosophy has always been considered as a negative. No, I tried to explain that last night. Today it's more relevant than ever in all of our gender culture and anti-patriarchy and anti-this, that, and the other. But you always have, according to Bergson, and this is what Deleuze picked up, is that difference is always a subtraction. And Deleuze is saying no difference, following Bergson or Deleuze's Bergson, is something positive. It's something productive. Difference. No, it's not a lack. Lack is difference has always been defined as a lack. Is something missing. No. And there's a whole genealogy of that. So what Anne is saying here very quickly is that, you know, this insistence of Deleuze on difference before meeting Guattari, but she's saying at the same time this will be important for his relationship with Guattari, is Deleuze's insistence that difference is not a lack. It is a positive, productive force. And that will be obviously the problem with Deleuze, who kind of, at that point, justifiably so, because in the historical context, Marx was still not too well known, but Marx was kind of implicated as being a servant of Hegel, and so Deleuze kind of saw it. That's an easy way of saying it, but Deleuze more or less saw things in that way. Hang on. Be right back. 1 second. What is the new problem? There we go. 22:30. So, what does that mean? It means, unfortunately for you, we have a little bit more time, and let's see if we can skip a little bit. Oh my God. We're gonna have to pick this up tomorrow. But we have to give due time to what we have to do. So let's translate this bit right here. So Anne obviously is going further, and she is telling us precisely, oh my God, precisely this. It is indeed a question which requires us to take into account the trajectory of Félix Guattari to understand what is happening at the time of May 1968 and the meeting with Deleuze, because at the time when Deleuze clarifies his philosophy of difference, Guattari, from these first writings, formulates a clinic of organizations, whether political or psychotherapeutic. It is all the more important to emphasize that Guattari is first and foremost a committed writer, and that he writes to transform concrete situations into collective connections. The texts, which were brought together in 1972 under the title Psychoanalysis and Transversality, do not move on the sole terrain of theory. So, Guattari, part of his, very important part of his life was obviously writing, but Guattari's writing was always towards concrete means, no? Deleuze, for example, we can say up until 1970, but I would argue much, much further, was ultimately interested in the metaphysics and the concept. And the concept, I may, is abstract. Sorry to ruin your world, but that's the way it is. So I've also fucked up again, obviously, and pasted the wrong language. What in God's name am I doing? Huh? No. Completely messed it up again. Nice. Oh, let's try and think. I'm over the limit of translatable words. That's wonderful. So, let's try this. Is that okay? Too many words. How many times do I have to do this? Let's try and find a logical way to block this. Break it down. Sorry, this is long, but okay, we should be good to go now. Let's get rid of this, which is the original French, but I do not want you to suffer my translation. We'll go back here, English on the way, 3, 2, 1. -1, -2, etc. There it is, we got it. If we now ask ourselves what Guattari's contributions to Marxism are, it is clear that they are very important and concern precisely, first and foremost, the question of organization. Interesting. Thus, this distinction that he establishes between several ways of engaging in organizations when he distinguishes subject groups, unitary and driven centrifugally to identify with a dominant position, with a leader, and subject groups, fragmented, headless, who favor difference. This distinction is truly decisive, directly resulting from his activist experience as much from his institutional experience at Laborde, but which is strongest is that it gives shape to transversality. This second concept, which he forged in 1964, is real theoretical and political dynamite, the tip of his theoretical offensive. Subjective groups operate according to a vertical hierarchy of domination of the command-obedience type, which horizontally implies hierarchical levels of the same order. And now, this is just one piece of this long paragraph, and I am pretty interested to find the second part because I'm a little bit lost here. Fonctionnant sur la hiérarchie verticale de type 1. Okay, we're going to pick up here and go down to here. Hopefully I will be a little bit more efficient this time. Oh my god, I need an Apple keyboard. No, this is interesting because this is something kind of new for me. This is the next part coming our way. 3, 2, 1. Call it. No, why in God's name? Is it the same text or not? Yes. Hang on. Let me get rid of this. Promise, 2 seconds, we're here. There we go. Subjected groups operate according to a vertical hierarchy of domination. We just read this, of the command obedience type, while horizontally implies hierarchical levels of the same order. Now, precisely, transversality proposes to multiply diagonal connections. This is interesting. To escape these vertical and horizontal relationships of subordination, to strategically thwart the power formations which so easily corrupt groups and small groups. Therefore, transversality thwarts the power formations of subject groups, and when it acts, the resulting organization is that of subject groups. These groups do not reform a unitary or substantial subject, but retain a control of their operations of subjectification without entrusting them to a master. Guattari, at the same time, revokes all sovereign centralization, justifying the exercise of power in the form of domination, and all totalization, all logical subordination, unifying a diverse whole under a universal concept. This totalization determines the exercise of domination, since it establishes the figure of a central, unique, unifying, and centralized power. So, I think we'll close things up here just because I've wasted a lot of time as usual this evening. So we will close this up. I hope tomorrow, can't guarantee it, I hope so. But just very quickly, this issue of transversality and Pierre Félix Guattari, when he was the director of the clinic in the board, which is also a very interesting and long history, is that essentially, and we've talked about this before, I'll just say very quickly, obviously, Guattari wanted to contest, if not negate entirely, the role as the chief doctor, chief psychoanalyst, as being God, essentially, as being the master, as, for example, Lacan would be much more tempted to act as a master. So in Le Board, Guattari he was running the institution. However, he would have his doctors share rooms with the psychotics, who were the patients, and they would sleep together, spend the weeks together, and he would give both the doctors and both the patients like chores or weekly tasks, like clean the rooms, clean the floor, cut the grass, but not only practical work, creative work obviously as well. And yeah, the idea of transversality expressed in this way is, instead of having a traditional hierarchy that, according to Deleuze, a vertical hierarchy also implies a horizontal hierarchy, which is normal, it's not so complicated. The CEO, Chief Managing Officer of a company, Steve Jobs, Vice President, and then you're going to branch, and then you're going to have 5 people, managing officer of this, managing officer, and then it's like it's going to go and branch off. So Guattari is saying, look, in any kind of institution, even with a small dimension, horizontal, vertical hierarchy will imply a horizontal hierarchy, and then what we start to do is draw diagonal lines in this whole hierarchy, and therefore, kind of the doctors get mixed with the patients, and then the patients get mixed with the doctors, and I've talked about this before, and I'm going to cut off here. Apparently, from what little I know, they say that Guattari at Le Board, it was a very effective clinical practice. It was appropriated by Italy in the 70s up until like the mid 80s, and they say it was also very efficient. Like we said, this Guattari is eliminating the figure of a central, unique, unifying and centralizing power, and this kind of idea not mentioned here, I'll just add, is that the patients are part of a community, and then the community being this anti-hierarchical community in which, you're sleeping at night with your doctor, essentially, or your nurse is in the bed next to you all night, is that completely avoiding this terrifying We all know that Deleuze detested doctors. I'm terrified of doctors because you go in there and it's the hierarchy, it's fear, it's judgment, on a psychological plane. So, yeah, from what I read, and it's not relevant now, I'm going to shut down, but apparently this kind of system did lead to very concrete results and improvements of the patients who were often severe cases of psychosis and schizophrenia, in which I remember reading that the capacity to enunciate would improve. No, you would start with simple noises, and then maybe after, in this kind of community at labor, that these people, as severely damaged as they were for whatever reason, that guattari's therapy was very, very affected. So, but anyway, that's not the context here. The context here is we are looking into the relationship between Deleuze, Guattari, and Karl Marx, and we have talked about Deleuze enough. We know that Guattari is much more militant, and everything he does was much more oriented to the concrete, and specifically, which is logical because he was running clinics for psychologically ill people organization. And Marxism, and Marx says this whole political science, sociology, it's all about organization. Also, Guattari was very, very well adapted to this kind of very practical way of doing things. He was militant, and he practiced, as we would say, as he preached. I mean, he effectively did what he believed in. So there's a whole other issue on how that relates to Marx and Marxism and communism. That's a whole other world, but that's not our point here. We're just getting quickly into Deleuze, Guattari, and I hope to clean this up tonight. Not possible, but we will be back tomorrow and try and get towards the end of this matter. As always, thank you to everyone that follows us, and not now, but in the next coming days, check out our website. And we tried to announce on Twitter. I'm not sure if that's clear. We have a dumb name on Twitter. It's called Dans le Pli, which in French means in the fold, but in English it's like Dan's Lepi. And then you can find us there, where we try to pre-announce when we show up, but I'm sure by now anyone that follows us knows that unfortunately we always show up a little bit late. So as always, apologies for that. Have a lovely Monday evening, a lovely week, and I hope to see you all soon. Take care, and bye-bye.